Welcome to the webinar, Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, Making an Impact, presented to you by the National Center for Healthy Housing and the National Safe and Healthy Housing Coalition. Our presenter for this section is Chris Corcoran.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for having me today. I'll be presenting and hopefully sharing some information with you all that will help you when you're getting ready to try to engage a media event. Traditional media, of course, is ever evolving. It was 7 years ago that I was working at the state capitol, and at that time, you know, there was certainly a lot of electronic access, but nothing like today's media. And certainly, we're seeing, you know, some of the traditional media being sort of being not made irrelevant, but certainly it's more and more difficult. So you got to be on your feet and be willing to adapt. But first of all, keep calm. Engaging media. If you follow some basic, checklists you might want to create, if you reach out to people and ask for help. It is something that is fairly straightforward, and as you build your skills, you'll find that you can go back to those same sources over and over again, and hopefully become even an expert for them. Okay, so simple steps for media turnout. Briefly, I'll cover up. I'm going to talk about the news advisory, what it is and isn't. Turnout calls, which actually now is really turnout emails or turnout communication. The press release and how important that is, and copy. You'll see that a couple times in my presentation. Now, I'm not talking about anything plagiarism-wise, certainly. What I'm referring to there is just trying to basically use other people's resources. If someone else has already done the work, for example, of creating a list of all the media people that you need to reach out to, you know, get a copy of it, use it, because there's no reason to build and rebuild things that have already been built. Same thing with when you're going to get ready to put together a media advisory. If you can get a copy of what one looks like, then you can use that and just customize it to your needs. So again, one of the first things you want to do, and you want to do this as soon as possible, your list of media outlets is really critical. You don't want to be building this the day before your event, certainly. You want to have good contacts. You want to be covering all different types of media. Again, for my market here in Connecticut, Eyewitness News 3 is one of the big TV stations, and they typically are pretty good about covering things. Hartford Courant, our traditional print media, the largest continuously published newspaper in the country, certainly is facing some struggles these days, but they're still very much active, especially in local and state politics, and they'll give coverage to various events. NPR is our radio station, and then CT News Junkie is one of the first online news sources that was really popular here in Connecticut. And interestingly, the woman who started that program, actually was really great about covering events when I was working with that coalition. So know who they are. Obviously now you're going to have an email address and a cell phone number, and you also want to make sure that you cover, again, all the different types of media outlets that might be relevant. And it's really not possible to overdo this list. You know, if there may be one particular event that you are covering, and that day there could be an editor or reporter somewhere that's thinking, I really want to do a story about how lead poisoning affects kids in Section 8 housing, for example. If you're doing an event about Section 8 housing, and they may ignore all the other press releases or media advisories you send out, but if that one happens to be the one, so your list can't be too big. It doesn't hurt to send out the email and get that moving forward. So create that list and have it ready for the day of, so that you're not running around trying to figure out the procedures for that. So the news advisory, which I actually have a sample of here, and obviously you're not going to be able to read the small part in the small print, but the news advisory is an important piece to doing the media turnout. It's a teaser. It's meant to generate interest, so you really want to put a lot of thought into what you put into it. You want to have catchy phrases, something that's going to grab the attention of some of these people getting these advisories. They're getting a bunch of different advisories every single day. So yours has to stand out somehow and make them want to send coverage to the event. Now, the event distribution for this would be 3 to 5 days ahead of time would be good, because again, this is not your press release. The press release is something you send out day of, and typically even right after the event completes, because you don't want people just to take that press release and use it to basically cover the event, so to speak. And I'll explain that later in the presentation. But if you send out 3 to 5 days ahead of time, and then you're going to do some follow-up, as I'll show you in a minute. But again, though, like I said, the format of the media advisory, news advisory, It's not super complicated, but if someone already has one of these, and for that matter, if you get in touch with me after this call, after this webinar, I'd be happy to share this type of information with you. That's one thing that's always been a part of our program, is sharing our information. And then copy, copy, copy again. If you can get a copy of one of these types of things, you don't have to build it and figure out, what's the best format, how does it look. Something like this comes out of my corporate communications office, so I know that they put some time and energy into how big is the header and where is it, who, what, when, where, is it who, when, what, where. So I copied this one for an event that I was putting together coming up. Now the news advisory, again, we really want to stress here, you want to have the media contact, you want to have a really catchy description of the event, and then the who, what, where, when. Those are all pretty simple and straightforward to do, because that's information that doesn't really fluctuate. And then the why, again, is your hook. Why is this important for them to put this onto their list? They're making note, oh, there's going to be a lead poisoning event at the state capitol on Thursday, so make sure it's on their calendar. So really put some time and energy into this. I encourage you to send this to other colleagues to read it through. If you happen to know someone, I'm really fortunate. I actually happen to know a reporter with the Hartford Courier, for example, so I sometimes will send her things and ask her, what do you think of this? And she'll give me some honest feedback. This won't really work because you need to include this in the title, or right now we're really interested in articles about X, so if you put this in, it'll be more likely to be read and then followed up on. So here's a sample of the press release, which is also a very important thing to create ahead of time. The press release is something, again, you're not going to send this out ahead of your event, because then people, in some cases, I say in my description of the press release that sometimes your press release might become an article if it's a small paper and they don't have a lot of time or staff, but they want to give some coverage to them. But they may just take pieces of your press release and turn it into a news article. So again, you really want to make sure you put a lot of time and effort into this, get as much feedback as you can about it. Again, planning ahead. So part of the planning ahead part of this is making sure that you get these quotes. Like, for example, if I have a quote going to my director of my program, it's usually going to take a few days for him to get back to me and say, yes, I like this quote, because there's certain channels I may need to go through. Your opening paragraph is critical. Again, similar to the media advisory, news advisory, you really want to grab their attention. You want to describe really clearly what's going on at this event, or what happened at this event for the press release, because you're describing the event kind of past tense. Choose your speakers carefully. Get local authorities. Obviously, in some cases, depending on your market, you're going to want to get different people from different offices. And also be prepared to go ahead and write quotes for people. You may have, like, I work at a children's medical center, so sometimes I need a quote from a physician. And it's going to be a lot better if I say, here's a quote I want to use that describes the event. Is this okay with you, rather than ask someone to create a quote? Because even sitting down and creating a quote for the doctors on some of the floors sometimes is really a lot to ask. So if I send them something already canned, and they say, yeah, that looks fine, or they may change one or two words, it's going to go a lot quicker than saying, hey, get me back to me, I need a quote about, and then also you're driving your message much better when you can create those quotes. And there's nothing wrong or improper about doing that. And again, imagine you release an article, and this actually happened to me with a couple of events I coordinated through the coalition I worked with previously, where the article was the press release or a piece of it. So put a lot of time and effort into that. So more aptly titled slide now, instead of morning calls, is morning communications, and that's because you're going to want to email the media list, and this is something you want to do the day of. You want to have again, hopefully your contact information, again, going back to the beginning when I said the media list, at the Hartford Courant or at FSB or NPR, there's different desks. So if you're not able to find someone, or say you get a list from a colleague, and maybe they work in a different segment, maybe they work with some type of thing around, planting trees foundation or something like that. You may want to find out, okay, is there a person at the help desk if I'm going to be announcing an article or a story, an event about something related to lead poisoning? So you have the right person. So you got to their desk. You get them between 8 and 9 a.m. It's probably a good time. If you establish relationships with any of your local press, you may want to check with them after one event or two and say, hey, is that a good time to send it over? Because different organizations, there may be one paper that their morning meeting isn't until 10 a.m. and you want to send it at 10:15. But the key is getting something in front of them. It's just a nudge. You don't want to call don't call more than once if you do a call, and don't email over and over again trying to get someone to say, yeah, I'm going to be there, because things happen on the fly. There's certain days where you have everything set up and you got confirmation from 4 or 5 different organizations they're going to be there, and then the morning of there's a big fire, and guess what? The coverage is going to go to the fire, and you just need to accept that. So confirm they have the news advisory, thank them, give them contact info for the day of the event. In the event they want to be able to get a hold of someone, if it's not you, who's going to be on site, give them a cell phone, so if in case they need anybody to talk to once they arrive there. And at the event, you want to be visible. You want to make sure they know, okay, if you see the reporter, walk up, introduce yourself, say, I'm here. You're going to have a media kit. The media kit, actually, I apologize, it should say press releases in there. That should be part of the media kit. A fact sheet, if there's any specific information you're really trying to get into the hands of that reporter. Again, they're going to be, especially if it's a television reporter, they're going to be reading over this stuff if they already don't have it in advance from your media advisory. So maybe there's some important things in there. They may say, wow, I didn't know X percentage of kids in Connecticut were considered lead poisoned, or X amount of kids suffer from asthma. It's important to have contact information in there, FOTS, which is short for photos, and digital media might be relevant. I haven't had a lot of experience with that, but I do know some organizations now are actually on a jump drive. They may have information for people that they can take with them. And then also being sure to make your speakers available to the press after the event ends. And in some cases, depending on the length of your event, you may have a number of people talking, and some of the people will start to wrap up. They may be the only one to hear the senator and the governor talk, and they don't really care about the local commissioner of water, for example. So but pull your speakers aside and say, oh, so-and-so wants to talk to you over here, and make it as easy as possible for the press to have access to the people they want to have access to. And here are a few websites. Like I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of information on the webs right now about how to do this. The publictransportation.org and prnewsonline.com websites I thought were really great. I looked at them just to kind of get a refresher on this. And also, almost as important, that creativepr.com link shows you about what can go wrong with your presentation. So you want to make sure you also take a look at that, because there are certain things you can do to prevent events from going wrong, and those are listed there in a nice way. So definitely a great set of slides.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing all those great tips and resources. For those of you listening to this, we did put up some links to all these resources that Chris has mentioned. You can also email him here. Here's his contact information. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the good work that you do for children's health and healthy housing.